And welcome back to the ABCs of ERP and Beyond. And today we are diving into a topic that a lot of businesses might struggle with when choosing an ERP. And that's how different systems compare in key areas like interconnectivity, pricing, customization, industry fit, and functionality. So specifically, we'll be breaking these down by looking at the key kind of differences and things to consider between Business Central and Acumatica. And hopefully that will help understand their strengths and trade-offs. So whether you're considering an ERP upgrade or just want to learn more, then this episode and this podcast is for you. As ever, I'm joined with my fellow co-host, Nirav Shah. Welcome back.
Hey, Peter. I'm happy to be here. Before we begin, I do want to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you very
Peter's
much.
birthday just passed yesterday. Not sure when this is going to air, but just passed yesterday. And I want to wish you a happy birthday, Peter, and hope you had a great day enjoying celebrating another year around the sun, as they say, right? So, happy birthday.
Made it again. I've made it round again.
Yeah, exactly. You deserve that beer. This is kind of a fun topic. Business Central, Acumatica have been kind of going head to head, I want to say, for the last, 2 years in fierce competition. They both kind of play in the same, I would say, tier in ERP. There's also a few other ones out there as well outside of Business Central and Acumatica. Obviously, you have NetSuite and you have Odoo and a slew of other SMB ERP products out there. But today I want to focus and talk about the Business Central and Acumatica piece, kind of some major differences, right? We won't get into the functionality side of it, specific functionality differences, but just overall, right? If there's anyone out there that's listening and this is kind of saying, hey, I'm starting my ERP evaluation. We're a smaller company. I've heard of Business Central. I've heard of Acumatica. Well, what do these companies, what do these systems do, right? What's the difference? Is there one I should be leaning on over another, right? That's kind of what we want to talk about today, is just to get you one foot in the door, right? Just to kind of see, are any of these differences just at a high level turnoffs for you, right? Or does that make you a little bit more interested to learn about that specific solution, whether it's Business Central and Acumatica? So this is, I think, an important piece, and I think from this one we could go many different directions and talk through functionality. We could talk through publisher support. We could talk through a lot of different aspects that should be important to new prospects and customers looking into both of these systems, right? Yeah. But this is, I think, a topic that I'm just surprised that we haven't done. But I'm happy that we waited this long to do it, because things are constantly changing with Business Central and how maybe Microsoft is doing things, Acumatica and how they're changing their things. So this is one that we'll probably want to revisit down the road as well. But happy to talk about this and give some more clarity, because it could get really confusing. Some of these lines get really blurred in the way these companies market each other at their specific products at the end of the day. So we're here to kind of set some of that straight.
Yep, and let's get straight to it, shall we? Point number one here: interconnectivity between productivity applications. So let's start off on Microsoft, because I know this is probably one of Microsoft's strengths, especially since most businesses are probably using Outlook and Teams and Excel.
I think so. Maybe just one or two businesses out there probably just use Outlook and Excel or something like that, right?
But we use it, but I'm not sure about others.
You might be the exception. No, it's Microsoft holds the keys to the kingdom in this particular point, right? When it comes to business applications, day-to-day productivity applications, Microsoft is the clear leader, right? Around the world. Office, which includes Word, Outlook, you have Excel, these commonly used applications, and we talked about Outlook and Teams now, right? It's where Microsoft is seeing the value of connecting their applications together,
Yep.
There's a lot of connection within Teams and Office, within Outlook and Excel, right? Previews. So that's no different with Business Central.
Yep.
Microsoft is essentially taken Business Central and extended it through its productivity solutions and apps out there.
Yep. And we
For
see this.
example,
We saw
yeah,
this in we did an episode season 1 with
you did.
uh, it was integrations, wasn't it? BC integrations in Microsoft, and we saw
Yeah,
this of
yeah,
how you can do approvals in Teams
yeah,
with very
yeah,
little effort to get there because of this interactivity
exactly.
in that suite.
Exactly. It's then you could take, beat Business Central, take a lot of subledger data, let's say general ledger data. You could take your item master, the whole item master, right? And essentially export it in Excel, edit in Excel, publish it right back into your ERP. That
Mm-hmm.
functionality is pretty powerful. And because Microsoft holds the keys to the kingdom, they don't release this, you know, easy to use type of back and forth between ERP and their applications to all publishers. So Acumatica, for instance, has it. They have the ability to export to Excel. They have the ability to import from Excel, but you can't edit in Excel, right? The Outlook Business Central connection is very, very tight. You could put in
Yep.
a full sales order, do full deep inquiries as you're supposed you could do in a regular Business Central client. You could do that right through Outlook with that integration, and it's free. By the way, you could connect Business Central to Outlook for free, right? Versus Acumatica, yes, there's a connection to Outlook, but it's limited. Right? You could connect cases, you could connect maybe part of your CRM to Outlook. You could look at opportunities, you could write activities, things like this. But it's not a rich experience like you would get with Business Central and the connection, and you got to pay
Yep.
for it on the
Yep.
Acumatica side. So, in this particular point, interconnectivity between productivity applications, when it comes to Office and Microsoft itself, I think Business Central is a clear winner here. It offers so much value out of the box. So you could connect
Mm-hmm.
Business Central immediately to your Office suites and start working back
And
and
through
forth
Azure,
with your users.
and through
And through
Azure
Azure,
AD
yeah.
as well. With
And through
you
Azure
can
AD,
have single
exactly.
sign-on out of the box without anything. And I know if you wanted to do that
That's
with
right.
Acumatica, guess what? You've got to buy a plugin for that.
Yeah,
The enhanced
yeah, yeah,
security. But it's the same with, as you said, with the Excel things. Like you can do it in
yeah,
Acumatica, but you're going to be reliant on third-party connectors. So I'm thinking
yeah.
like for Elixo for your Excel reporting, um,
Mm-hmm.
and it depends what you want to connect to, but you always have to go and look at the external industry in terms of plugins and connectors to actually get there. Whereas, yeah, it just makes it easier. But it's easy to say once you're in that ecosystem, then
Mhm.
everything's possible. You got the whole Power Platform suite of Automate and Power BI like at your fingertips.
Mhm.
It's a big, like if we were to say, and we should do this for the other points we've got, is who wins? Who
Yeah,
wins this round? This
yeah,
one for
yeah.
me, it goes to BC, goes to Microsoft BC.
It definitely does. One thing though to consider, right, which is a little bit of a, I don't know if it's a risk, but let's say your account information gets hacked, right? That could potentially lock you out of Business Central as well, not just your other Office
Mm.
applications, right? Versus keeping it separate. Now your ERP is not affected. You could with Acumatica, you could go and still log in, change your passwords, and not worry about you know changing any of that on the Azure side.
Yep.
So there are a little bit of pros and cons there. But I agree. I think Microsoft does win this particular point. But the risk I think needs to be weighed, right? How important is the sensitivity of your data? How important is it that you can't be down, right? And do you want to risk lumping it all in one ecosystem in Microsoft? Keep your ERP separate. So
Yep.
yeah, but the experience is a lot tighter between Business Central and Outlook and Office suites. So.
Yep. Yep. And I think on the data and analytics side, BC wins here. Acumatica, it's not too bad, like being able to
Mm-hmm.
expose certain tables or generic inquiries, as they call them in Acumatica's world,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to exposing that to through OData.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of, hate to say it, but you can use the OData connector in Power BI
Right.
and link
Mm-hmm.
directly to your ERP. But even
Yeah.
the OData feeds can be a nightmare if you're trying to pull from big tables through
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
OData. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
god, does it crawl along? But again, it's easier to land the data somewhere else for BC than it
Yeah.
is Acumatica.
Yeah. It
There we
is.
go.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Um, good. Let's move on. Point number two here. This is a big one. This is, I think, the stark difference between these two is the way that they go around pricing, their pricing models. So let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about the biggest difference straight up BC between Acumatica, and then we can kind of dive into the benefits and which one might be more suited to
Mm-hmm.
particular customer. So, what's the main difference here?
Yeah. So the main difference here is Acumatica is transaction based pricing. Essentially, their claim to fame is unlimited users, but you pay for transactions, right? Versus Business Central is user based licensing. So every user that's going to touch the database is going to get some sort of license, and they have different license types, right? Versus Acumatica is pretty much just a single license type, and you control what users see and what they don't see by permissions in the system, right? When we say transaction based with Acumatica, let's start there first. Okay, it's called ERP transactions. Okay. And what ERP transaction is, and what they qualify that to be, are 8 different record types, meaning they consider sales orders, shipments, AR invoices, customer payments, purchase orders, purchase receipts, AP invoices, and AP payments, okay, as transactions. Now, how do they know what transaction tier you should be on, what transaction level, right? So here's an example. Let's say you're a company and for a single month, you do 800 AR invoices, 700 customer payments, 400 AP invoices, 200 vendor payments, 500 sales orders. The single highest volume for the month was 800 AR invoices. So your transaction volume, right, would given to you through Acumatica, right, would be 800 transactions a month, right? So there's probably no exact 800. You'd probably say, what's my next tier up? It's going to be 1,000. So you would be on the 1,000 transaction tier license, essentially. Okay.
Yeah.
And you could have unlimited users around that. So if you have, let's say right now with 4 users, let's say your business goes up maybe 5% or 10%, right? You'll still be within that 1,000 transactions per month. But let's say you decide to add 5 more people, you have a fixed cost in license. Your
Mm-hmm.
license cost has now gone up, right?
Yep.
So you could add those 3 people, they could start using Acumatica, and they're off and running, but your fees, your Acumatica cost has not gone up,
Mm.
right? Versus Business Central, they have 4 different license types. The license types that Microsoft offers, the highest license is called the premium license, and that gives you access to the full Microsoft Business Central applications, all the modules, which includes essentially um, manufacturing and service.
Mm-hmm.
One below that is Essentials. So Essentials is the ability to do everything in the system, including kitting, but you just can't do manufacturing and service. Okay.
Right.
then the license under that is a team is a warehouse user. So it's called device license. So that's someone that's going to be using Business Central on the warehouse floor potentially. Then they're only kind of transacting, issuing material to production orders, or logging their labor time against routings. Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
it's called device license, which is $40 per user per month. And then the lowest, right, the most kind of generic, or I would say restrictive type of license, is a Teams license. Teams license only could do five different types of transactions. They can't post to a general ledger, but they could create a sales quote, right? They could maybe create a purchase quote. They could create customers. They could do inquiries in the system, that type of thing, right? Run reports. So that's a Teams user, which is $8 a user, right? There is unlimited transactions, so you don't get dinged for any type of transaction limit. Like if you go over a certain number of transactions, you don't get dinged. Whereas in Acumatica, you don't particularly get dinged or penalized. They will kind of work with you for the first 3-4 months as you go over, monitoring your usage. But then after that, if you consistently go over, Microsoft will kind of force you, and sorry, Acumatica will force you to get onto the next higher license tier. Okay. And it kind of makes sense because you're using more resources on that
Yep.
same server box, wherever that is, right? And taking away from other customers in that same box, essentially. So they'll then tell you and give you some time to prepare to move up to the higher transaction tier, whereas Microsoft won't do that, right? You could have as many transactions as you want. You just keep paying for users that you bring into Business Central that
Yep.
use your solution. Both of these solutions don't offer concurrent licensing, right? That was a thing back in the day, concurrent licensing, because you bought the software essentially, right? It was perpetual based. Now everything's kind of named user.
Yeah.
I know with Acumatica, you could, with a single login, you could have up to like 2 concurrent logins with a single ID, 2 or 3. With Business Central, I think it's maybe 2 or 3 as well, but it's mainly named user.
Mm-hmm.
And with prices as low as they are, no one's trying to abuse that policy anyways, which is good. But that's really the main differences: is you are looking at transaction-based pricing versus user-based prices within Acumatica. Now the big question: who wins here, right?
It
Which one is a
depends.
clear winner?
There is.
Yeah.
There isn't for me. It depends what you want. It depends. If you've got a large
Right.
user base, then. But then I think it still depends. Do you favor
Yeah.
predictability over user based
Right.
pricing
Right.
to the detriment of, well, I've got lots of users, but at least I know what my cost is going to be,
Right.
versus I don't think you could call a winner. It depends on your
Yeah.
business and what you prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I don't. In my eyes, is not one clear winner. I could see the benefits of both. This one I'm going to have to give to both essentially, and find a model that fits your business. What is your company strategy? Do you want to with the transaction based model, you're not managing licenses, right? Which is a big relief maybe to IT folks or some admin people, right? Versus in Business Central, yeah, you can hire new people. You got to make sure that they get their licenses. You got to make sure the license gets assigned, right? And then inside Business Central, you got to make sure you got to pull in the users so they have access to
Yeah.
the system. There's a little bit of work there. Okay.
Yeah.
How frequently do you hire people? What stage of growth are you in? Versus,
Yeah.
are you pretty complacent? You're not going to hire too many people. Your business is kind of running.
It depends if
You
that
know,
fluctuates. If you're in an industry where your workload fluctuates, maybe
yeah,
seasonality because you're using contractors, at least on transaction-based model, there you haven't got to worry about that. You can add
right.
people whenever you need, and not have to worry about the costs incurred. You just set them up as a user in Acumatica, job done.
Yeah. Hmm.
Whereas it's going to be a little bit harder on the BC side if you've got
Hmm.
seasonal temp employees.
Yeah, yeah. One thing to consider with Acumatica transaction-based pricing, if you have integrations and APIs outside of just the day-to-day transactions, those also get considered as transactions. So, that could creep the price up, maybe higher, uh, creep it up, a little bit outside your comfort zone, maybe from a pricing perspective, versus, again, when you go to the non-transaction model, which is Business Central, you can have as many integrations as you want. They're not going to ding you, right, for a transaction just by user. So, but on the other side, right, we always recommend when you're doing API integrations with Business Central, buy a license for that API user, right? Don't use a admin user or don't use your own user ID or whatever. Have a separate user license for that API integration, just so it's separate. And in case it goes down, you know which user that is, and so on and so forth. If somebody leaves and their password changes and that API goes down, you're kind of screwed. So you kind of have to buy those API users. But again, pros and cons. This one is a hard one to pinpoint who really wins here. Just depends on what your model is, what you're more comfortable with, and take it from there.
Yep. Good. Number 2 done. Number 3, more on the technical side, but it's the development platforms. We've got Business Central with AL, application language, which is proprietary. And then on the Acumatica side, we've got the XRP platform. So what's the major differences here on development platforms?
Yeah, I think to put it, in layman's terms, it's one's industry practice, industry standard, C plus, right, and .NET, essentially, XRP, right. Everyone
Yep.
kind of knows how to code using that language. Easier to do customizations, easier to maintain. Versus AL, like you said, Peter, is proprietary. You need a certain type of developer that understands this language to create the customizations, which could end up being a little bit more costly to do the customization versus something that's more industry standard, and you could kind of plug people in to do the work and understand. Now, obviously there's a element of understanding the architecture, the logic, right, of how these databases are created, or put together to support the business processes inside the software. But it's what are you more can you find the resource to manage, right, the specific type of development to do? And I'll tell you, it's hard to find Business Central resources. Not hard, but costly, maybe. And then kind of the same on the Acumatica side too. It's costly, right? I think it's just costly to find ERP consultants and developers in general right now. But if I had to say, which ones are, which is a little harder to find, I would probably say it's harder to find someone that has a proprietary experience, the specific language experience with like Business Central, for example, versus like Acumatica.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think using something that's a little bit more, it's not open sourced as such, but something that's a little bit more industry wide than something like AL is always going to win in my eyes,
Yeah.
because more people are going to know it. It's inherently a little bit less bogged down in just pure code. I wouldn't say it's completely low code, no code, but it's certainly easier to develop in that platform than it is on something like AL. And AL gives me nightmares, especially when you come from the old one before AL, when it was just cow
Cal.
code. Yeah, yeah. Shiver when you look at some of that stuff. So
Spaghetti, right? That code just becomes spaghetti really, really fast.
yeah, and often undocumented.
Yeah. Oh my God. All the time. Not often. All the time. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so for me, Acumatica wins on this one using the
Ecumenical wins this one.
XRP
Yeah.
platform.
I think so. I think that's a lot. It's very robust. A lot you could do with it, um, and the maintainability long term.
Yep.
I think it's a lot more reasonable. I think.
Yeah.
Not to say Business Central does. They have their own set of developers um, and ways to maintain it. But if you're looking for something that's more industry standard, and easier to maintain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you just don't have the
Acumatica.
restrictions on vendors and developers
Yeah,
as
yeah,
much as you would on
as
BC.
much. Exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, good. Rattling through these, but this one is a relatively big one. Number 4, industry fits between BC and Acumatica. And again, they kind of diverge here on their approach to doing it. So let's talk about how BC kind of say, if you're in a construction industry, this is the kind of stuff that you need to consider versus Acumatica's straight up construction edition, manufacturing edition, distributor
Yeah.
edition, where it's a little bit more defined. So let's break this one down and see what we
Yeah.
got here.
Yeah. Business Central, Microsoft does not market Business Central by industry. It just doesn't. It just says, business application, ERP, enterprise resource planning product, essentially, for
Mm-hmm.
any customer. Okay. Um, does that get confusing? I think it does, especially after seeing what Acumatica does. And Acumatica does this really nicely because they've already categorized and included modules that are necessary for by industry type. So
Yeah.
they have out of their box, they have 4 different type of industries that they essentially market. They have construction, manufacturing, they have distribution, and professional services, right? So they go ahead and market that for specific purposes because they have the functionality to support that industry out of the box. Versus Business Central becomes a little bit more tricky because you get Business Central and then you find that there's gaps and there's blind spots that doesn't support your industry. So now you got to fill that with different type of ISVs and customizations, right? Versus the industry editions mainly have that um, that functionality almost all there, 90% all there. Now could be different in terms of the way you do things, and you got to then ultimately do some customizations or even put in an ISV. I'm not saying you can't, you will not have to, but there's a higher chance that you'll do that with Business Central because it's more generalized out of the
Yeah.
box than you will have to do with a Acumatica product.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think both are probably. I think it's less of a consideration. I think if you're a distributor, I think both out the box are very strong in
Yeah,
distribution
agreed.
anyway. But
Totally
it's as
agreed.
soon
Yeah.
as you're looking at like, okay, I work in construction. I'm a railroad company.
Yeah.
Or if I'm in
Yeah.
manufacturing or as you said, professional services,
Right.
BC's weak in this area anyway with project management and time tracking. So I think this is a bigger consideration if you're not just a straight up standard kind of distributor. Um,
Right.
but
Right.
yeah, I agree on this. Like Acumatica's way of saying, right, if you're in this industry, if you work in construction, here's the modules you'll get included because they're the ones that typically we see construction industry requiring. Job costing and field service features versus okay, well, you don't really need bomb management or something.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so I think that's really good that they've kind of said, right, these kind of core features belong in this industry. That's the edition you want. And you can always get, add other modules if you do need them to enhance it. But it's just a
Exactly.
little bit easier, especially as you
Yeah.
said on the BC side of things. You've just got get this, then it's like the wild, wild west of trying to find third-party
Exactly.
ISVs to kind
It,
of
it
plug those gaps, and it might be a critical
exactly.
gap as well. Like,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
that's the
Yeah.
risk. And now you're having to
Yeah.
look outside of Microsoft to be able to get a solution that's critical for the core of your operations. And that's, in my eyes, that's a dangerous game because we
Hmm.
know that Microsoft isn't going anywhere. We can't necessarily say the same for the ISV.
Right. Right. Exactly. And dealing with ISVs has its own set of challenges, and I think that's maybe one thing that we could probably even do its own podcast on down the road is how what best practices in working with different ISVs, right? But it's a risk,
Mm.
um, because their code layout could be different than the way Microsoft code layout is or process, and there could be some conflicts. So if Microsoft does some major changes to modules or functionality, next thing you know, right, that ISV has to keep up. Otherwise,
Yeah.
there's going to be some confusion there. But yeah, I like how Acumatica does this. They make it clean. They take out a lot of the guessing work in what you'll need with the functionality out of the box. So you just kind of try to fit yourself into a specific edition, and from there are off and running, and then maybe fill a few holes versus with Business Central. There could be more than a few that you need to fill because it's a lot more generalized.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I think that Acumatica's got the finger on the pulse for this. It's only recently we saw the new professional services, so they're obviously still looking at the verticals out there and going, does our solution cater for this? Uh,
Yeah.
and they're constantly kind of looking for those industries that they might not be that strong in. I think there's a point at which they're going to have to stop saying, here's another edition, because they've got a
Yeah.
few now, and
Yeah.
it's just going to get a little bit messy if there's like 25 different editions, and that depends on which one you're in. Like, what type of distributor are you? Um,
Yeah.
but I think the approach is right. It's nice to see them again. It's something that they're doing differently to BC here, a different approach, just like we saw on the pricing model,
Hmm.
and it's nice. I think this makes it a little bit easier. It makes it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
me, uh, this one, well, this one only goes to Acumatica purely because of that addition structure, and it just makes it easy, and you haven't got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
worry
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
ISVs. What
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
think?
And not including what when they do upgrades, or when the two twice a year upgrades, they upgrade the edition, the specific edition, with functionality that
Yeah,
edition will benefit from,
yeah, yeah,
right? Which is
yeah,
really nice. So
yeah,
it's very focused on that, which rightfully it should be at the end of the day.
yeah,
So it's not like a generalized functionality. It's functionality specific to an edition. That I think
yeah.
that message to me is a lot more powerful.
Yeah, you're right. We saw that at Acumatica Summit. And I didn't really think about it, but yeah, right. It's not just like here's 25R1, off you go.
Yeah,
It's like here's
yeah,
25R1. This is what the construction people get. This is what the
exactly.
distribution people get. And I remember sitting there,
It's
and there was like 2 rows back. There was something in
yeah,
the construction world. I don't know what it was. A new feature coming. They cheered. They
yeah,
stood up and clapped. So, but you're right. A new major release, it does also get
yeah,
functionality for each module.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. So who is the winner, Peter? Over here, who wins this category in industry fit?
Oh, absolutely, Acumatica.
I agree. I agree for sure. I agree. I think Acumatica is a winner here. They make the message very clear. These are the industries they operate in, and that you'll get one of these out of the box, already predefined modules
Yeah,
for you to run your
yeah,
business.
yeah. And I think this works on both sides. I think it works on the partner being able to sell it, and I think it works on the customer side, just feeling more confident that they're getting a solution that will work for them. Like I
Hmm.
think that's a really strong point. It makes it easier
Yeah,
for the partner to sell it. It's like, right, you're a
yeah,
manufacturer. Here's the things you get. You get
right,
bond management. You get
exactly.
MRP. You get shop floor control. You know, um,
Hmm.
which gives them a little bit more confidence that the system's going to work. And it
Exactly.
makes it easier for the partner.
So much easier. So much easier. Absolutely.
Talking
Acumatic's a
about
winner.
yeah, absolutely. So talking about partners, point number 5, customer type. So what do you see from the partner angle of the difference between BC and Acumatica, and is there any kind of patterns you're seeing of these types of customers go towards BC or?
Yeah. So, you know, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way out there. This is just our experience. We sell Business Central and Acumatica as a business, day in and day out, right? We talk to customers and we try to find out what is a good fit for them, what type of solution, and try to help them, get into the right solution that's going to benefit them for the next 20, 30 years. And just experiences of good and bad, right? This is just from what we see out there. But this is not by any means also black and white, like it's only this way, right? There's a bunch of gray area here too. But let's kind of, if we're gonna say what's the best fit right here, the best fit, right? What we usually see are customers that are on QuickBooks, currently on QuickBooks, and they need an ERP for one reason or another, right? Whether it's a bank requirement or they just hired somebody that has ERP experience and they want to upgrade their business infrastructure and they're looking for ERP or whatever the case is. If you're on QuickBooks and you're maybe under like 5 users, right? Overall, 6 users overall. That's, I think, like a really sweet spot for Business Central to get into an ERP. Okay.
Yeah.
And then once you're on Business Central, you could use that for another 30 years, right? 20, 30, 40 years, because there's so much functionality there.
Mm.
But that growth from QuickBooks to BC, I think, is a lot more, I think it's a lot more natural because the UI and,
Yeah.
some of the ways that you could do transactions and things like that. I think it's more aligned with the QuickBooks type user and what they would expect in a next level system for them, upgrading out of QuickBooks
Yeah.
into an ERP, which would be Business Central. That being said, have I seen Business Central implemented in much larger companies? Absolutely. I've seen Business Central implemented in, companies that are, $350 million a year. You're talking about 400 licenses. Can Business Central handle it? Absolutely it can, right? But when I say, QuickBooks to Business Central, I think that's more of a natural progression, especially if you're like a small user count. Versus Acumatica. Acumatica, I feel like, is more for a little bit of a more mature customer that has ERP or that understands ERP. They have
Yeah.
separations of duties. They have, specific departments. They have, they have 15 users, right? In the business, essentially. They are looking for a really robust product in their industry, right? They have a current ERP system that's being sunsetted or is no longer supported or something, and they have to look for another ERP system. Well, Acumatica is the perfect candidate for that type of customer because it's a little bit bigger software. No doubt about it. There's just more
Mm.
software to Acumatica out of the box than you're getting with Business Central. So, from our experience, that's what we see from a customer type and how they do it. So, if you're 10 users or less, 8 users or less, maybe Business Central is going to be the right approach for you because that's going to be a natural
Mm-hmm.
progression from QuickBooks. If you're 15 users, if you're 20 users and you're already on a legacy ERP system that you need to get off of, maybe it's outdated, doesn't really work for you anymore, your business has changed, Acumatica is going to be the right approach for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, but can Business Central be the right approach? Absolutely, it could be, right? But think about some of the points that we talked about today: interconnectivity with your productivity suites, right? Pricing, right? AL and XRP platform, right? Industry fit, right? It's just not customer type, but you have to consider these other factors that we talked about to come up
Yep.
with the right decision for your
Yep.
business.
And I think if you're a business that says, well, we've got 10 users, you've got 10 users currently, but you might have 50 employees.
Yeah.
And 40 of them aren't users in your ERP because you saw it, as a waste of money for them having a user license that would be paid for. Or maybe you're on an on-prem ERP that struggle, and the very nature of that struggles to get it onto the shop floor. So
Mm-hmm.
I think also think about how many users you could have, because if you're moving, especially if you're moving from something like QuickBooks, which is more of a back office tool rather than a business-wide tool like BC or Acumatica. You might not be in a position where you've only got 10 users, or you've only got 5 users. You could
Right.
potentially have 50 users, that because now you're incorporating, let's get the ERP down onto that shop floor. Let's get our production line workers booking in raw materials. Let's have our material handler tell the ERP what material we've got in stock and where it is and how much is in WIP,
Yep.
which would then
Yep.
drive the back office procurement. So you could end up having a lot more users than you currently have. And the number of users could end up matching the number of employees you have. So
Right.
that's a consideration to make for this. And I think it's also a consideration to make on the pricing. It's not, if you're moving from an ERP onto another one, it's not just a lift and shift. It's going to be a whole analysis of how can we connect our business deeper and more widespread in the ERP than we can do at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Absolutely. And it's an important choice here, right? Whatever you're going to invest in here, it's not going to be a cheap, type of investment. You got to think of this as like you're investing in your business, and you're streamlining all these pieces of operations that are being handled by paper, that are being handled by Excel spreadsheets, that are being handled by different systems, right? You're putting everything into one. And you have to definitely take care in finding the right solution that's going to work for you, and what your
Yeah.
business goals are long term. Where do you see your growth, right? Do you see your growth in people or transactions, right? Do you see your growth in you want to have more of a common development language, or do you want to keep it more proprietary, right? Out there, right? Uh, do you want to gamble with mixing your user IDs between Azure AD, or keep that separate from your ERP, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you look at hacking and stuff like that, that's going out there. So there's a lot of considerations here, and I'm hoping that we're able to just bring a little bit more clarification, right, and help make the decision a little easier when it comes to if you are up in the air between Business Central and Acumatica, and which one's going to work for your business, right? This is just high level. There's going to be functionality fit. You want to make sure it's going to work in either side, but yeah, I think this was really important to share with everybody.
Yep. And that pretty much wraps up today's deep dive on BC versus Acumatica. So it's good to cover all of these. We covered pretty much everything from integration, pricing, industry fit, customer types, development types. But I guess at the end of the day, choosing the right ERP, it comes down to your business needs. And that's whether you're moving from QuickBooks, looking towards more deeper functionality across your business, or just you now need a system that's growing with you because you're moving off a legacy one, or the current ERP you're on doesn't support today's business. Because as we said, these only come around like typically every 10, 15 years a company would go through something like this. And I would say a vast majority of companies are very different than they were a decade ago. Even more so maybe these days post-COVID. So I think there's a lot that you need to consider, and it always comes down to what are the needs of the business, and let that drive you towards what kind of ERP you want. And then that puts the difficulty back on the vendors to say, right, how the hell do I structure a demo that demonstrates the business needs that I don't know what their needs are. So I guess that's your problem to do wild stab in the dark of what the hell do I show these guys when they've just asked for an Acumatica demo. But maybe we should cover that one day, how you approach
we should cover that one. I think that'll be good. Yeah, be prepared for your demo, right? How to prepare your partner for the demo, so you get the most value out of it. I think that's great.
So if you found this episode, though, helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, leave us a review. We typically shoot every we shoot every week, and we release a new episode every other week. So every 2 weeks you can find us on YouTube and all the major podcast platforms. So find us and find us on LinkedIn as well. We must keep mentioning that.
Yes, we are building that page. for
Yep.
our community.
So plenty of ways to get in touch with us. So if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover next, feel free to reach out. And with that said, thank you, Nirav. Thank you to everyone listening.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter, and happy birthday again.
Thank you. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to continue to celebrate. It's 2:21 p.m. It's time to get the beers.
Time to get beers.
It's
There you go.
sociably acceptable as well. So
absolutely,
it was acceptable anyway because it's my birthday weekend.
It's your birthday. It is. It is.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Yeah. So as much as I love speaking to you, I'm going to go and celebrate my birthday now.
Please do. Please do.
Good. Catch you on the next one.
Thank you.